So now we begin part 2 of shading a sphere in Photoshop. And you may already know that Photoshop has tricks you can use. It has a shape tool. It has like a marquee selection tool you can make a circle with and add a gradient, that sort of thing. But I don't want you to fall on any of these tricks, because you'll remember the sphere we're shading is kind of just a practice for being able to shade and draw many other things. We're just trying to learn the basic technique that we can apply to things that are not spheres. So that's why we're trying to go through all the motions to make sure we know how to do it with things that are not simple shapes. So let's open up a brand new file. I want you to go to New. If you've just opened Photoshop, it'll give you an option on the side that says Create New. And either way, you're going to get this window that pops up where you get to choose the size and the resolution. Let's do a size not huge, like 7 inches by 5 inches. Make sure this says inches, because if you make it 7 pixels by 5 pixels, it's going to be tiny. And then we go down here, and the resolution is how many dots per inch are showing. So this would make a pretty small picture. I'd like you to go to maybe 200 dots per inch. And then you can say create. So on our brand new canvas, nice and white, we're going to start working with layers. And layers are pretty awesome because they allow you to kind of separate your work. So we've got this button down here. And if we click on this, we see that this appears, layer 1. And it's separate from the background, and we can have lots of layers on there. And the layer that is highlighted is the one you are working on. So for example, I'm on layer 5, and I paint some stuff on layer 5. Oh, it's beautiful. And then I go to layer 4, and I paint some stuff on layer 4, and you can see it goes behind layer 5. And the cool thing about this is I can reorganize my layers. I can drag this layer up above layer 5, and you can see my picture on layer 4 goes above and on top of the other one. Also, if I decide I just really don't like one of my layers, I can turn it off, and I can keep things separately. So, for example, maybe this is my drawing that I did, and I want to color it. So I can go to another layer down here, and I can color in my drawing. Maybe I want this part to be blue, and this part, and then over here I want to grab a nice pinkish purple color and color in those. And you can do this, and then you decide, oh, I actually don't like those colors, I want a new color. You can go back and you can paint over it, easy peasy, and you're not messing up your drawing at all. In fact, I can kind of be sloppy about it sometimes if my lines are hiding my mess, because what it actually looks like is that kind of blobby. So each of these layers you can hide by clicking the little eyeball view, or you can bring back. So you can even compare things and say, I like it with that, I don't like it with the red on it right now, whatever, right? And then if you want to get rid of a layer, you can just hit the trash can button. Select the layer, hit the trash can button. If you are on a layer that's hidden and you're going to try to draw something, you'll see it won't work. Your layer is hidden. So you say, okay, I have to make it visible again. So when we get to drawing our sphere, if I pop back to where you are when you first open up Photoshop, you've got this nice white background. And here's a mistake that a lot of people make, is they do their drawing directly on this background. So maybe I draw the sphere and I'm ready to, ooh, gosh, no, man, this sphere has seen better days. So I draw my sphere, and then I want to shade it. Maybe I shade directly on here, or I give it some shading to make it look spherish. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And then I say, I want to draw a background on my sphere. Okay. I'm going to add a layer for my background. I'm going to drag it down to the bottom because I want it to be behind my drawing. And I choose a good background color, and I start to color in my background, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm painting, where's my background? The problem is The layer you painted on here, you can see is white. It has white all across it. That's not, you're used to drawing a piece of paper where white means it's the base that you put everything on. But in Photoshop, this white is a color. And you can even erase the white. Oh, if I get it on the right layer, you can erase the white and see through it. So you can see now that, yeah, I actually was coloring the whole time. I was just coloring underneath that white and I couldn't see it. And if I move that to the top, that's what I was coloring the whole time. So what you do want to do is create your new layer before you draw anything. Just let your background be a flat color. Don't worry about the background. Don't use that very often unless you just need a certain color for it. So I'm going to pop in my new layer before I even draw my sketch. So now I have a layer 1 that is transparent. If I turn off my background, I can see it's got the checkerboard on it, and that means it's transparent. You can see right through it. And the background is a nice white to have behind my sphere to start with. So now I'd like to introduce you to the brush tool, which I've kind of already been using to show you things. It's hanging out right here. It looks like a brush. If you have something that looks like one of these other brushes, if you've got the pencil tool or a color replacement tool or mixer brush tool, you just hold down on this little arrow until you can choose the brush tool. Up here, if you click on this icon, you have lots of brush choices. You have a whole list of brushes. And most of them you won't use very much, but they are there if you ever need them. You've got all kind of fancy things like this splatter brush. You've got brushes that look kind of like a charcoal brush or like a pencil or like an oil paint brush. You've got lots of different things. But for now, we're just going to go up to the top general brushes, and I'm just going to choose a soft round brush. So right now my brush looks like this. Yours might look totally different. Here's about 4 different ways you can adjust your brush that we're going to use very frequently. One adjustment is the size up here, and that's pretty obvious, right? You can make it bigger or smaller. Another way you can change the size is if you look on your keyboard right next to the letter P, there are bracket keys. And the bracket keys, they have a squiggly bracket printed on them, they have a square bracket printed on them. Right next to that one is the other side of the squiggly and square brackets. If you push the left key, then your brush will go smaller. If you push the right key, the right bracket key, your brush will go bigger, and that's an easy way to adjust that. Then we've also got the hardness and softness adjustment. So a very soft brush, if we turn the hardness all the way down to 0%, it looks fuzzy and foggy around the edges. If we turn that hardness all the way up, it looks very sharp and hard on the edges. And this one is basically just a circle printed a lot of times, so it looks like a squiggly worm around the edges. Boink. Then the other adjustments you have for your brush, I'm gonna delete that layer and stick in a new one. The other adjustments, the other major ones you're going to be using, happen up here: opacity and flow. So for most of your brushes, these are going to work almost the same. So if I take it like this, 100% opacity is going to completely cover up my canvas. If I choose another color, that's going to completely cover up the color underneath it. If I turn down my opacity by clicking that arrow and dragging this, or putting a number in there, then my color is only going to go on somewhat transparent, and I can see through it, and I can add different layers to it. And with opacity, you can, as long as you don't pick up your brush, you can color in an area, and I'll have one level of opacity. Then I pick up my brush, and I tap it on again, and it's one layer darker after that. And if I do that again, it just gets darker and darker and darker. And you can see how that might be helpful with shading something. I'll turn that all the way back up and turn flow down. So flow is basically how much paint is in your imaginary brush. How much is going to come out onto the paper each time you push it on the paper. So you can see that with a circle brush like what I've got going on, you can see through the circle each time, and you see each print of it. So flow is really useful if you're using a brush that has some kind of crazy texture to it, and you want to make sure that that texture shows through in your brush, and you don't want to eliminate any of that. So by adjusting these two things, you can decide how light or how dark it's happening on your canvas. Okay, brilliant. Again, I'm going to delete that layer, it's a mess, and add a new layer.